What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today's video is from the line. We're going to be hearing from a caller that's decided to call in and try to prove either God to us or some other kind of crazy idea. So, if you want to fuck around and find out how crazy this call gets, then please stay tuned.
But we have calling from Germany. Klaus, pronouns are he, him, wants to ask us a question about Yahweh giving us a second chance. So, Klaus, you're on with John and Matt. How are you?
Hey, how you guys doing?
How's that?
Pretty good.
Good. Yeah, so my question is pretty straightforward. If you pretty much died today and you found yourself in hell, and then Jesus came to you and gave you a second chance to worship him, would you guys take him up on that, or would you basically say, fuck you, you're an immoral piece of shit, and I'm just going to choose to suffer forever instead of worship you?
So, of course, I don't have enough information to truly answer this because Jesus got a lot of explaining to do before I make that. But in general, my answer is going to be no. I have no interest and no desire and no need to worship anyone or anything, and any being that requires worship is I already think immoral. But if I'm in hell and Jesus comes down to hell and is like, hey, if you worship me, I'll get you out of here. I'm not even sure that I could. And would I be able to fake it and fool Jesus into thinking that I worship, oh yes, you are so mighty. The whole thing doesn't make sense.
If I can butt in real quick, I think that the entire question is rather hilarious to me because let's transpose this. At least this is how my mind works. Let's transpose this to any kind of real practical situation. Let's say, you're about to fall into a pit of fire, and I walk over to you and I'm like, hey, I can help you up right now, but you have to worship me and pretty much become my slave. If you agree to that, then I'll help you up. Otherwise, I'm going to let you fall, to your death. Is that is that really the mark of a good person right there? Is that the mark of anybody that you would want to worship or love or anything like that? And that's before we even get into the theology of Christianity and Jesus and what Yahweh did in the Old Testament and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the entire premise that you've set up here is rather ridiculous to me. As if to make it out to be like, oh, if Jesus revealed himself to you after you die and you're burning in hell, would you worship him then? My answer would be the same as letting somebody fall to their death. Fuck no, I would not, because that is a ridiculous situation and is not representative of anybody that anybody should worship or follow, even if there's any kind of good reason to do either of those things.
Okay. So do you think that the United States should torture people when they're doing interrogations?
I'm really
enhanced interrogations. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm just really confused because you called in to ask something about Jesus and whether we should, whether we'd adhere to a second chance. And now you've jumped to torture. I don't understand the connection between the question.
I'm getting that, if you'll let me.
Well, that means that what you said you called in about isn't what you actually called in about.
It is. It was just a jumping off one.
Okay, well, let's jump off then.
Okay. So yeah, are you guys down with enhanced interrogation techniques?
No.
When the CIA? Okay. So why not?
No, it's definitely been proven that enhanced interrogation techniques generally produce false information because the person that just will tell you anything to make it stop. And so like it just,
okay.
I mean,
No, exactly. So you guys
Okay.
think you guys think you'd be able to withstand that in hell? You think you'd be able to say, no, I'm going to stand on my beliefs. I'm going to.
I have no idea. I have no, Klaus, I have no idea what I would actually do in hell because I'm not in hell. Maybe with a gun to my head, would I say that I worship Jesus? You bet. Maybe if I'm in hell and there's a chance and it's just absolute torment, maybe I would lie. That's why I asked if it was possible to fool Jesus. But if you ask a hypothetical, the whole point of the hypothetical is to get to what is your ideal. To suggest that I wouldn't have the strength to say no to Jesus while I'm in hell is completely irrelevant to the point of asking the question.
Oh.
Okay. And Klaus ran away.
Oh shit. I mean, I was just gonna say like the entire question that Klaus presented was I mean, still ridiculous. I don't care how he goes about it. Like the entire proposition of like Jesus could save you, but only if you worship his dick is like it's a totally ridiculous thing to even present to somebody, I feel.
It's first of all, I mean, John, I mean, coming from my Christian background, there's nothing about Christian theology in an orthodox sense, in the sense of the overwhelming majority of denominations, that suggest anybody in hell is going to get a second chance. But what is the second chance? It's not consistent with doctrine. So, for example, if I put my Southern Baptist hat back on, salvation is by grace through faith. And so what that essentially means under the Baptist model is that God chooses who he's going to save, and it is God's grace that instills within you the faith that will lead to your conversion. It's not, no action that you do or anything else. And so you're like, oh, if you were in hell though, and Jesus came down and said, hey, I can get you out of here. Yeah, is it possible that in hell I would say or do absolutely anything to get the suffering to stop? Sure. But if we're talking about an ideal and what, me as someone with values and integrity would suggest is the case, this is why I was saying Jesus has got plenty of explaining to do. If you're coming down, if Jesus comes down and I'm in hell and is like, oh, I can get you out of here if you worship me, I might go, yes, I worship you. Oh my God, I worship you so much. You are so awesome. Ooh, you are so good. And the question then becomes, did I fool God? Is this God so weak and feeble and inept that it thinks, aha, I got another real worshiper? Just like if you walked up to somebody with a gun and were like, give me your money or your life. That's just the normal kind of process of saying, hey, I'm going to bully you into saying something you don't believe. Is it possible for me to say something I don't believe? You bet. Absolutely. You pay me enough, I'll say whatever the fuck you want. You give me $1 million right now and I will tell you how much I love Jesus. It won't be true. But would I say it for $1 million? Of course, because I can always correct it afterwards and I can correct it before. So I just don't get the purpose of a question like that.
Yeah, I don't either. But typically, whenever somebody asks me that kind of question, it's always leading to the whole thing of, well, that means that you just don't want to believe and worship Jesus. So, like, that's the reason why you're an atheist.
Yeah,
it's usually to chase you into that corner.
And that's why, when Klaus was going down the road of, torture and enhanced interrogation techniques, we know that it leads to problems. And that's why, even when I first answered the question, I started off with, oh, can I fool God? Because somebody who's under enhanced interrogation, their only concern is to get it to stop. And if it turns out saying something that isn't true gets it to stop, then I'll say what isn't true. We already know people do that. The issue is the people who are doing the torture don't need, if they're God, They don't need to torture you for information. They already know the truth. And so what the scenario doesn't make sense. Oh, what happens if an all-knowing God asks you to honestly tell them what you think of them? Would you tell them? Well, if he's already all-knowing, of course I can tell him, because he already knows. What's the point in lying? And what's the point in lying anyway? If God showed up right now and said, "Hey man, I'm really not the bad guy you heard about. I'd like for you to worship me," I would have lots of questions. Number one, what are you really like? What are you looking for? What are your values? But also, why are you obsessed with this notion of worship? And what does worship mean to you? Because if it just means I'm going to adhere to your policies and everything else, cool. Then it's not you that I'm worshiping. It's the ideas. And even that's not worship. It's just adherence to. I don't know.
Do you think, and we can get to the next theist caller right after this question, but I kind of feel like proposing that kind of question, like, as like, would you then worship Jesus in order to get into heaven? Do you think that rules out like the moral argument that is sometimes made by apologists, like saying that, oh, well, morally good people go to heaven? Like, I kind of feel like it rules out like being a morally good person at that point. Like, it's solely focused on like faith in Jesus.
Yeah, I come from a background where no one is good, not one, and there's nothing you can do that is good, and we are all just filthy wretches that God either chooses to save or doesn't, and the best you can do is try to live a Christ-like life, and be thankful that you are one of the elect, one of the chosen, that are going to go to heaven. This notion that good people go to heaven and bad people go to hell, first of all, not biblical. Hardly at all. I mean, you got to really stretch to read some verses that suggest that. And so the people that end up doing that, these are the people who were raised in a church but didn't understand it. I watched a video, I'm not going to say who, from an atheist that I actively despise. And he posted a video. I'm not going to give details on it, but it references a Bible verse that is supposedly problematic. And there's absolutely no problem. It is a straightforward, this atheist does not understand the basics of Christian doctrine and how that passage in the Bible should be read. And so they read it and they make a video, and all they're going to get is some Christians are going to be like, "Oh, you don't understand. You took it out of context," or whatever else. And the Christians aren't wrong. This person made a bad video about a verse that's not a problem. And I was just sitting there going, this just made my job harder, because somebody's going to call and ask about this verse at some point, and then I'm going to have to go through. And every time I have to point out, oh, yeah, the Christians got this part right, or yes, there's another atheist that gets this wrong. There's just no guarantee that whether or not you're an atheist or a theist, that you are engaged in skepticism or critical thinking, or that you know and understand even, what the Bible has to say. There was a guy called in just the other day whose view of the Bible is that Christians eventually become capable of not sinning. And I'm like, when does that happen? And can you give me an example? I'd love, who's the example of the Christian who got to a point where they never sinned anymore? And he's like, well, I suspect Paul got that. Wait, what you suspect about someone who's been dead for 2 millennia is complete, that's not evidence.
Well, and I don't think it makes sense. Is it in Paul's epistles where it says that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God? Is that Paul, or I can't remember where that is in the Bible?
No, it's not Paul. It might be, but in any case, the issue. The issue here is that there are passages that people have spent a lifetime trying to make sense of. And apologists sometimes don't agree. And if you can take any verse standalone and respin it, but you have to look at it in the context there. And it's actually quite often theists, Christians in particular, that are ignoring the context. They pick a context from the Bible, oh, this is all tied to the story of salvation. And so, for all have sinned and fallen short. Yes, that's Paul. It's in Romans. Yes, somebody in chat did it. So yes, that is Paul. But that's a secondary issue, because that's everybody has sinned. The caller was saying every Christian can get to a point where they no longer sin. And that, I don't know where they got that. Because when they tried to point to chapter and verse of where they got that idea, it talked about being sinless and blameless. But that's not about, hey, I don't sin anymore. That's about, my sins are forgiven. And similarly, there's a quote. Well, I don't want to direct anybody to the video. Let's get to some more callers. I'm staying in super chill mode and don't need to start a fight with somebody I can't stand to talk to anyway.
Well, heathens, that's going to be it for this call today. If you want more of this kind of content, you can hit up the links down in the description to go and subscribe to The Line here on YouTube. We're always producing great live content where we take callers from people. We're also adding new shows all the time. So please go down there, subscribe to The Line so that you can get more of this kind of content. I'm not sure if this was 20 seconds or anything like that, but yada, yada, yada. Jimmy, go fuck yourself.